Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Americas. Coming up, 2 mass shootings in 1 week in the U.S. reignite the debate over gun control. Joe Biden urging Congress to act fast on background checks and banning assault rifles. Then Evanston, Illinois becomes the first city in the U.S. to offer Black residents reparations to make up for decades of segregation and discrimination. A look at the new plan coming up. And the company helping people in Ecuador plant trees for survival is actually the biggest deforestation expert in the region. I'm Jeannie Godula. First, America's been rocked by a second mass shooting in less than a week. This latest one leaving 10 dead at a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. The shooting spurred a new round of calls for federal action on gun control. The president, Joe Biden, now urging Congress to act fast to pass new legislation. But just like with previous pushes for gun reform in the U.S., there is a very real worry that nothing will come to pass.
After the latest massacre in Colorado, Joe Biden tackles the gun debate and considers issuing executive orders. The U.S. president pressing Congress to enact tougher gun control laws.
I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save the lives in the future and to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to act. We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
On Monday, a mass shooting took place at a supermarket in Boulder. The alleged perpetrator, a 21-year-old man, was arrested. He's been charged with 10 murders, including that of a police officer. The suspect used an assault rifle model often favored by those who've carried out mass shootings. The authorities are still trying to determine a motive.
I promise the victims and the people of the state of Colorado that we will secure justice and do everything we must do to get justice in this case.
The supermarket shooting comes less than a week after 8 people, mostly Asian, were killed at massage parlors in Atlanta. Despite popular support for measures such as expanding background checks, debate on gun control remains deeply polarizing. With a razor-thin majority in Congress, Democrats are unlikely to overcome Republican opposition to meaningful legislation.
Now, many Americans expect Democrats to be tough on gun control. They also expect them to be lenient on immigration as well. But Joe Biden's reversal of some of Donald Trump's strictest policies there has provoked the country's biggest surge in immigration in 2 decades. U.S. officials are now struggling to care for migrants in federal custody, with critics blaming Biden's strategy for the failings.
A challenging situation at the U.S.-Mexico border. Those were the words of Kamala Harris, who said the Biden administration was doing its best to cope with the growing influx of migrants.
We've got to treat this issue in a way that is reflective of our values as Americans and do it in a way that is fair and it is humane. But we have to meet the moment, and there's a lot of work going into that, and we expect to have success.
Since his inauguration, Joe Biden has worked to dismantle a slew of Trump-era immigration policies, including the automatic deportation of unaccompanied minors. But just months after taking office, his administration is now facing the country's biggest immigration surge in over 20 years. In February alone, the number of child migrants increased by more than 60% compared to the previous month. Both Democrats and Republican lawmakers have blamed Biden for the influx, with some accusing the president of sowing chaos with his naive immigration stance.
With the stroke of a pen, President Biden rescinded effective immigration policies that the Trump administration masterfully negotiated. Biden has created a crisis at our southern border through these policy blunders.
Biden supporters, meanwhile, are blaming the current failings on the Trump administration's immigration policies. But with some 15,000 underage migrants currently in U.S. custody, including a third being held in facilities for adults, the issue is turning into a crisis that Joe Biden can't afford to ignore.
Along with immigration and gun control, one of the biggest hot-button issues in the U.S. is reparations. Should the U.S. government pay African Americans to make up for the harm caused by generations of slavery and discrimination? Well, one city outside Chicago is already moving ahead on that issue. Evanston, Illinois has approved a $10 million fund for ongoing reparations, financed in part from a new tax on legalized marijuana.
A historic first as the city of Evanston in Illinois agrees to pay reparations to Black residents harmed by racist housing policies. Like many cities, Evanston once segregated neighborhoods using a process known as redlining, which made it harder for Black families to live in white areas.
My great-grandmother, who was in Evanston, I guess she probably been here since the late 30s, early 40s. And she was a business owner, and the redlining affected her and her husband because they were trying to open a business in a well-established area of Evanston. But she was forced to just stay in one certain area to the point of she had to have the restaurant in her home.
The impact from those policies are still felt today. The city's 5th ward, where Delois Robinson's family lived and worked, is predominantly Black and plagued with infrastructure problems, because another effect of redlining was a lack of investment in minority neighborhoods.
And usually what the description of redlining is that you do not, it advises banks and real estate agents to devalue those areas and not invest in those areas. So it would be unwise to do that, and primarily because, listed out, has a high population of Negroes.
The city council approved an initial amount of $400,000, which will provide $25,000 per family for home ownership and home repairs. Officials have also earmarked $10 million for continued initiatives to be funded from a new tax on legalized marijuana over the next decade. To be eligible, Black residents must provide proof of ancestry or that they experienced housing discrimination. Advocates hope the program could become a national model for other cities and states grappling with the issue, like Amherst in Massachusetts.
Reparations for Amherst is an effort to repair the harm that was inflicted upon people of African descent through racial discrimination and slavery here in our community.
Congress is considering a bill that would create a National Reparations Commission to study the issue. Both the president and vice president have voiced their support. But polls show a different picture. A Reuters Ipsos survey last summer found only 1 in 5 people agreed the U.S. should pay damages to descendants of enslaved people.
There have been more skyrocketing COVID-19 numbers in Brazil. This week, the daily death toll there surpassed 3,000 people, reaching 3,251 for the very first time. Its average daily death toll has more than tripled since the start of the year and is now the highest in the world. Brazil has over 12 million confirmed COVID-19 infections, the second highest worldwide after the United States. The surge in cases pushing many Brazilian hospitals to the breaking point. Next now to Ecuador, a place that has the highest annual rate of deforestation of any country in the Western Hemisphere. In the province of Esmeraldas, many locals are trying to replant their own trees in order to help make a living, either by selling the fruit or the wood. And strange as it may seem, they're being backed by the biggest deforestation company in the region. Here's more from our team on the ground.
In the village of Chontaduro, Don Humberto takes us to his plantation. He owns more than 150 hectares of land where he grows cacao, mangoes, and many more species of fruit trees. 35 years ago, he arrived here with nothing.
It was an unspoilt land. There was only forest. Only forest. Lots of wild animals and fish. Everywhere.
Chachi indigenous people like Humberto speak of an untouched wilderness that is mostly gone today. Deforestation is rampant in this region of Ecuador. Many local people are trying to reforest their properties in order to make a living out of their trees, either by selling fruits or wood. Oddly enough, the main deforestation company in the area is supporting this initiative.
The deal says that they cut down trees and then they give us seeds to reforest. But when we started, we didn't know much, so we planted everything and then realized that the tree species they gave us were no good for reforestation. It's not quality timber.
Why would a logging company give seeds to indigenous communities?
I think this company is trying to clear its conscience, but they don't plant anything. It's nothing compared to what they cut down.
Environmental NGO Foundation of Hokotoko runs 2 reserves in the area. They decided to help the Chachis reforest as well, hoping to make a real change.
We're planting trees in order to try to recover what there was before. But I don't think we'll be able to recover what we had, because most of the forest has been cut down. Regenerating a forest that has been wiped out can take many years.
For some, this initiative is too ambitious, but if it works, the Chachis could both regrow a forest and earn a proper living.
We'll leave you now in Peru, where one elderly recipient of a COVID vaccine was so happy he literally danced for joy. This is 85-year-old Jose Luis Macedo, who couldn't help breaking out the moves in Lima after he got his first shot. Macedo, who got the jab with his 60-year-old son in tow, says he can't wait to get his second dose and is most looking forward to going back to the clubs and dancing. We'll leave you with that. Thanks so much for watching France 24. We'll see you next time for another Inside the Americas with all the news from north to south.